September 1953, a British Army testing range. Officers watch as a soldier drags a submachine gun through a muddy trench, submerges it in a water barrel, packs the barrel with sand, then shoulders the weapon and fires a full magazine without a single stoppage. The watching brass exchange glances. For a decade, they have been trying to replace the most hated weapon in British military history, the Sten gun, a weapon so unreliable that soldiers joked the best way to clear a room was to cock it and throw it through the doorway. Now they are looking at its successor, a weapon that looks almost as crude, with its side-mounted magazine and skeletal folding stock. They call it a plumber's nightmare. They have no idea it will serve for 41 years. This is the story of the Sterling L2A3, the submachine gun that soldiers despised on sight and came to trust with their lives. To understand why the Sterling mattered, you have to understand what came before it. After Dunkirk in 1940, Britain lost vast quantities of small arms and faced potential invasion with almost nothing to fight back. American Thompson's submachine guns cost $200 each, money Britain did not have. The solution was the Sten, designed by Major Reginald Shepherd and Harold Turpin at the Royal Small Arms Factory in Enfield. It cost roughly $10 to produce in about 5 man-hours. Over 4 million were manufactured during the 1940s. It was never meant to last. The Sten Mark II was made of sheet metal tubing held together with rough welds, pins and bolts. The stock was often just a piece of pipe with a butt plate welded on. Soldiers called it the plumber's nightmare, the plumber's abortion, the stench gun, and the Woolworth's wonder, a reference to the cheap retail chain. A popular joke ran, made by Marks and Spencer out of Woolworth. One Canadian soldier composed a famous ditty. "You wicked piece of vicious tin, call you a gun, do not make me grin, you're just a bloated piece of pipe. You could not hit a hunk of tripe." The hatred ran deeper than aesthetics. The Sten's double-stack single-feed magazine, copied from the German MP28, was chronically unreliable. Dirt, mud, or even slight damage to the feed lips caused jams. Soldiers routinely loaded only 30 of the 32 rounds to reduce spring strain. The magazine was the fundamental flaw. Rounds stacked in 2 columns had to merge into a single column before feeding, creating a bottleneck where cartridges could catch, tip, or jam against each other. In combat conditions with mud, sand, or simply rough handling, this design failed constantly. Worse, the open bolt design combined with crude safety mechanisms made the weapon terrifyingly prone to accidental discharge. If dropped or jolted with the bolt cocked, the Sten could chamber and fire a round, then uncontrollably empty the entire magazine on full automatic. The bolt was heavy, the sear was weak, gravity and momentum could overcome the safety. According to veteran accounts, during a parachute drop at Soukell Arbor Airfield in November 1942, a Sten accidentally discharged and wounded several paratroopers, reportedly inflicting more casualties than the enemy did during the operation. One Korean War veteran recalled watching a soldier drop his Sten. After the initial shot, the weapon must have recocked itself, because when it hit the ground, it recommenced firing. Each time it fired, the recoil would spin the gun in a circle faster and faster. The British Army needed a replacement. They would wait 11 years to get one. George William Patchett was not a career weapons designer. Born on the 23rd of December 1901, he began as a motorcycle racer and engineer, competing for Bro Superior and the Belgian arms company FN Herstal. He won the Welsh TT at Pendeen in 1925 and the sidecar race in 1927. In 1930, Czech arms manufacturer František Janeček recruited him to work at Jawa Motorcycles, where Patchett designed the popular Jawa 175 Villiers. When the Nazis occupied Czechoslovakia in March 1939, Patchett photographed the German occupation. According to later accounts, he smuggled prototype material out via the British Embassy, a dramatic detail often repeated in Patchett's biographies, but not firmly documented in official records. Back in England, Patchett joined the Sterling Engineering Company in Dagenham, Essex, initially helping manufacture the Lanchester submachine gun. By 1942, he was chief designer and had begun developing his own 9mm submachine gun. On the 25th of September 1942, he demonstrated his first prototype to the Ordnance Board, firing 412 rounds. The board recorded it as essentially a Lanchester without butt or sights, and noted it was meant to be hip-fired, their verdict. The carbine functioned satisfactorily, but they wanted a stock and proper sights. Patchett went back to work. His design philosophy was practical synthesis. He used the receiver tube dimensions from the Sten, the magazine well and barrel shroud form from the Lanchester, and a folding stock influenced by the German MP38. A key innovation was placing the pistol grip at the weapon's balance point, an unusual choice at the time that improved one-hand controllability and handling. By 1944, approximately 120 pre-production Patchett Mark Is were built, and a handful saw combat. The Imperial War Museum holds serial number 078, carried by Lieutenant Colonel Robert Dawson, of No. 4 Commando during the attack on Walcheren in Operation Infatuate, November 1944. This represents the earliest confirmed combat use of the weapon that would become the Sterling. Now, before we see how this weapon finally got adopted and proved itself in combat, if you are enjoying this deep dive into British engineering, hit subscribe. It takes a second, costs nothing, and helps the channel grow. Alright, let us get into the bureaucratic nightmare that almost killed this weapon. The Patchett's journey from prototype to adoption took 11 years, a testament to peacetime military inertia. After the war, with millions of surplus Stens in the inventory and the budget slashed, there was little appetite for a new weapon. The critical turning point came in September 1947 at Pendeen, where the Patchet Mark II competed against the BSA machine carbine Mark II designed by Claude Perry, the MCE-M3 from the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield, and an Australian design. All weapons had faults. The MCE-M3 overheated and burned a firer's hand. The Patchet's trigger mechanism failed. The Australian entry fractured. The BSA's cocking mechanism was too stiff. The BSA initially pulled ahead, but its manufacturer could only produce 6 of the 100 ordered due to prohibitive costs. The decisive trials came in May 1951, pitting the Patchet against an improved BSA, a redesigned Australian MCE-M2, and the Danish Madsen Model 50. The Patchet was judged better than all other weapons tested. Even then, adoption was nearly derailed when the Army briefly adopted the EM2 bullpup rifle, which was supposed to replace everything including submachine guns. When Winston Churchill scrapped the EM2 to satisfy NATO standardization, the Patchet's path cleared. On the 18th of September 1953, the weapon was officially adopted as the submachine gun L2A1. Despite the formal Patchet machine carbine designation, troops simply called it the Sterling after its manufacturer. The name stuck. Rapid refinement followed. The L2A1 became the L2A2 in 1955, then the definitive L2A3 in 1956, the version that would serve for 4 decades. One evaluating officer during troop trials distilled the verdict perfectly. It has all the advantages and none of the disadvantages of the Sten. The Sterling's legendary reliability came from 4 key engineering decisions, each directly addressing a Sten failure mode. First, the curved double-feed magazine. The 9x19mm Parabellum cartridge is slightly tapered, so a curved magazine body accommodated this natural geometry, allowing rounds to feed more smoothly than through a straight magazine. Crucially, Patchet switched from the Sten's disastrous double-stack single-feed design to a double-stack double-feed system, where rounds alternated from each side, eliminating the bottleneck that caused most Sten jams. A pair of rollers replaced the conventional flat follower, converting sliding friction to rolling contact and allowing grit to be pushed aside rather than accumulate. Firearms experts have called it likely the finest submachine gun magazine ever contrived. Second, helical grooves machined into the bolt served as a self-cleaning mechanism. As the bolt cycled, these spiral channels gathered dirt, fouling, sand and debris, and channeled it out of the receiver. This was arguably the Sterling's most important feature for adverse condition reliability. Third, dual concentric recoil springs, 2 nested springs driving the bolt, reduced bolt bounce during chambering, improved accuracy, and ensured reliable function across different nations' 9mm ammunition, with varying propellant charges. Fourth, advanced primary ignition fired the cartridge while the bolt was still moving forward. Part of the recoil energy was absorbed overcoming the bolt's forward momentum, allowing Patchet to use a lighter, smaller bolt while maintaining controllability. The result was a weapon weighing just 2.7 kilograms unloaded, significantly lighter than the German MP40 at 3.97 kilograms, the American M3 grease gun at 3.63 kilograms, the Israeli Uzi at 3.5 kilograms, and even the supposedly cheap and light Sten Mark II at 3.2 kilograms. The L2A3 fired at 550 rounds per minute, achieving a muzzle velocity of 381 meters per second with an effective range of 200 meters. It held 34 rounds in that distinctive curved magazine, and with the stock folded measured just 481 millimeters, compact enough to fit almost anywhere. With the stock extended, overall length was 686 millimeters. How did this compare to the competition? Against the German MP40, the Sterling was nearly 1.5 kilograms lighter. Against the American M3 grease gun, it fired significantly faster, 550 rounds per minute versus the M3's sluggish 450. Against the Israeli Uzi, the Sterling's side-mounted magazine allowed a much lower prone profile, a critical advantage in trench warfare and urban combat. The Uzi's pistol grip magazine made prone shooting awkward at best. The Sterling's muzzle velocity of 381 meters per second slightly trailed the MP40 and Uzi, both approximately 400 meters per second, but far outpaced the M3 grease gun's 280 meters per second. Where the Sterling decisively won was reliability. Its double-feed magazine and self-cleaning bolt gave it an edge in mud, sand, and Arctic conditions that no competitor could match. The Sten, MP40, and early M3 all shared the same fatal magazine flaw, the double-stack single-feed design that caused most stoppages. Only the Uzi, with its own double-feed magazine, came close to matching the Sterling's feed reliability, but its open bolt receiver was more susceptible to sand contamination. The Sterling's combat record spans an extraordinary breadth. After limited Second World War use, it was almost immediately in action following adoption, serving in the Malayan Emergency, the Mau Mau Uprising in Kenya, and limited field testing in Korea. It fought through the Suez Crisis, notably used by both sides since Britain and Egypt had both purchased the weapon. It served in the Borneo Confrontation, the Aden Emergency, and Northern Ireland's troubles. The Falklands War of 1982 produced the Sterling's most famous moment. At the Battle of Goose Green on the 28th and 29th of May, the attack by Two Para faltered against entrenched Argentine positions, with interlocking fields of automatic weapons fire. Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Jones, commanding officer of Two Para and armed with his L2A3 Sterling, moved to the head of his battalion and led the assault personally. He checked his Sterling, then ran uphill toward an Argentine trench. He was hit once, fell, rose, and was hit again, falling just meters short of the position. Jones died within minutes and was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest decoration for valour. His example broke the stalemate. Two Para took the entire trench system and captured nearly 1,200 prisoners. In an irony of arms exports, the Sterling was used by both sides in the Falklands. Argentine Buzos Tácticos, their amphibious commandos, carried both standard Mark IV and suppressed L-34A1 Sterlings during their initial invasion on the 2nd of April 1982. The L-34A1, the Sterling's suppressed variant also designed by Patchett himself, entered service in the mid-1960s and earned a reputation as one of the quietest integrally suppressed submachine guns ever made. Rather than a bolt-on silencer, it used an integral suppressor built around a ported barrel. Gas bled through holes in the barrel into surrounding expansion chambers, decelerating and cooling the propellant gases, while reducing bullet velocity from 381 to 296 meters per second below the speed of sound, eliminating the supersonic crack. The result was a weapon where the only audible sound was the bolt reciprocating, described as not much louder than a staple gun. The L-34A1 armed the SAS in Northern Ireland and Oman, the SBS for sentry removal, Australian and New Zealand SAS in Vietnam, and even American MAC-V-SOG teams on prisoner snatch missions. The Sterling found a second life in cinema. Set decorator Roger Christian, working on the original Star Wars in 1977 on a shoestring budget, sourced real Sterlings from Prophouse Bapty & Company and transformed them into the iconic E11 Stormtrooper blaster. Christian later explained that he had always loved the Sterling submachine gun because to him it looked like a science fiction weapon, so he thought he could turn it into a blaster for the Stormtroopers. He added rubber cooling fin strips, a Hengstler counter on the magazine well, and an M19 tank scope. Some props were live-firing Sterlings modified for blanks. Sharp-eyed viewers can spot spent casings ejecting in certain scenes. Over 400,000 Sterlings were manufactured in Britain between 1953 and 1988, split between Sterling's Dagenham factory and the Royal Ordnance Factory at Fazakerley, Liverpool. Licensed production in Canada yielded approximately 30,000 C1 variants, while India's Ordnance Factory at Kanpur produced at least 5,000 units, and continued manufacturing as late as 2010, including all international production. Total numbers likely exceeded 1 million. Patchett himself had to sue the Ministry of Defence after the Royal Ordnance Factory produced his weapon without paying royalties. The case dragged on for over a decade until the High Court ruled in his favour in June 1966. According to contemporary reporting, Justice Lloyd Jacob called him a distinguished inventor and valued designer, awarding him approximately £117,000, a substantial sum equivalent to several million in today's money. The Sterling served from 1953 until full withdrawal in approximately 1994, a span of 41 years. It lasted this long for three overlapping reasons. First, it was simply very good at its job. Second, its replacement, the SA-80 L85A1 bullpup rifle, was designed to eliminate the submachine gun role entirely by being compact enough to serve as both rifle and personal defense weapon. This meant there was no urgency for a dedicated submachine gun replacement. Third, the SA-80's own troubled development, plagued by staffing changes and caliber conversions, delayed its introduction until 1985, with production continuing through 1994. Sterling Armaments itself went bankrupt in 1988, acquired by British Aerospace, which shuttered the Dagenham plant. The company that built the gun did not outlive the gun's service life. As one veteran put it, "Every soldier who ever used a Sterling will tell you it never stops. It is great in the jungle, requires minimum maintenance, does not need oil, will fire even after being underwater." Another British soldier wrote that the Sterling SMG is a beautiful weapon and that he loved using it. He called it an idiot simple, utterly reliable weapon system. The Plumber's nightmare nickname belonged to the Sten, the crude wartime stopgap that soldiers genuinely hated. The Sterling was its redemption. George Patchett, a motorcycle racer turned weapons designer, took every failure mode of the Sten, the jamming single-feed magazine, the dangerous accidental discharges, the crude construction, and engineered an elegant solution for each one. The real story is the transition from institutional skepticism to battlefield trust. Military bureaucracy took 11 years to adopt the weapon, nearly killed it multiple times, and then tried to avoid paying its inventor, yet the Sterling outlasted all the committees that delayed it, serving through the jungles of Malaya, the streets of Northern Ireland, the mud of the Falklands, and the deserts of the Gulf. It armed a Victoria Cross recipient in his last charge. It became one of the most effective suppressed weapons of its generation. It became a Star Wars icon, and when veterans talk about it decades later, the word that comes up most is not nightmare, it is reliable, the hated weapon that soldiers learned to love. The Plumber's